Have you ever had that moment where everything crashes down on you and you realize you can't keep living this way? The point where you know you've lost control. What if that moment could actually save your life? If you're ready to turn your lowest point into your starting line, then this is the episode for you. Welcome to the Men's Mental Health and Movement Podcast. One step stronger, live longer. Today, my guest is Nic Collins, a man who spent 18 years in industrial sales whilst battling substance abuse, depression and suicidal ideation. After being pulled over for drink driving and spending the night in jail, he changed the trajectory of his life forever, and now he's over 6 years sober. He also has run 2 marathons and 7 ultramarathons, proving that movement is medicine. If you've ever hidden your struggles behind professional success or wondered if it's too late to completely change your life, this is the one for you. Nic, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Tony. I really appreciate you having me on here. I'm excited to get into a conversation with you, and thanks for that lovely intro as well. I appreciate it.
Yeah, excellent. So let's just take you right back to that night when you got pulled over for driving under the influence, or DUI as they call it in the US, or drunk driving in the UK. Take me back to what led up to that. Why did you end up being drunk driving?
Yeah, well, that night, I was probably 36, 37 years old. I had been driving while drinking for almost 20 years at that point, 15 plus years. So, I mean, it was really a whole lot of things that kind of culminated in one moment. But I will say this, I struggled with depression and suicidal ideation in my 20s and early 30s. And right around the time I was 30 years old, I began seeing a counselor. So I was doing a lot of work to try to untangle some of the things that had gone on previously in my life. I had stripped my life all the way down to nothing and had to rebuild a foundation step by step by step. So when I got pulled over at 37, I had already done some of that work. It might not have been apparent to my friends yet or the people, that I interacted with, but internally, I will say that I was on a good trajectory already, but I still was drinking heavily. That was kind of one last thing that I really needed to address. And so I got pulled over. I had been thinking about stopping drinking alcohol because of all the progress I made in other areas. That was kind of one big glaring thing that I had left. And I just think it's important to give that backstory, because when I did get pulled over and arrested, I don't know that I would have sustained abstinence after that had I not done all of the work the years prior. I probably would have gotten out of jail that morning and went to the bar, honestly. So I just think it's worth saying that, a lot of times the work is done in silence, and that's what happened with me. And that was it was still a very pivotal moment, because then my progression in life really just took an exponential turn upward. So yeah, a friend of mine and I were in a little mountain town, and we had been on a whitewater rafting trip the day before and had a great time, and went out in the town and had some beers with each other and met some friends and all of that, and had a good old time. And it was a small town, and so there were no cab companies. There was no Uber or Lyft. And so it's something I had done thousands of times probably before, Tony. So I hopped in my truck and we were going to drive home, and we didn't make it even a mile before we were pulled over, and they asked me to get out of the truck immediately and handcuffed me and drove me to jail.
Mm-hmm. So you were arrested, and then you spent the night in jail. Just take me through that process. Well, I mean, were you actually drunk, like as in really intoxicated, where you couldn't, or you just had a few beers?
Allegedly. Yeah, I mean, I probably wasn't any more drunk than I've driven before in the past plenty of times, but
Yeah.
Did I need to be operating a vehicle? Probably not.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we had drank plenty of beers. We had probably been down there for 4 or 5 hours. So yeah, it was something in my comfort zone. I felt like at the time, because it was something I did habitually. I mean, regrettably so, but that was the truth at the time. But yeah, I felt comfortable doing it. I felt like I could get home safe, but that doesn't mean that it was safe for me to be driving. So yeah, I would say I was probably classified as drunk. I can't remember exactly what my ABV was.
Right.
Or actually I never blew. That's why I went to jail. I refused the breathalyzer. That's how it works here. I refused the breathalyzer. And so then by default, they have to take you to jail. So I stayed there that night. It was interesting. I was driving. So we were still probably 8 miles away from where we were staying. And my friend was also intoxicated. So they wouldn't let him drive my truck. They towed my truck and just left him out on the street. And we're like, you got to figure it out. And we were out of town. So it wasn't like he had somebody he could call to come get him. And anyway, so that was kind of odd. And they took me to jail. And I just remember the whole check-in process, the ride there. I remember all of that because the town I was in was where my grandparents were from. And I got pulled over right next to an old mountain cabin that they used to stay in. And so it was kind of nostalgic from that standpoint. But I remember waking up on the floor the next morning and just being like, I know that I'm better than this. Like, I know that there's more than this. And I've done so much work to get here. But now look at me. I'm just laying on the floor of this jail cell. Like, was it all for nothing? Am I really a piece of shit? I don't know if I can cuss on here. But, all those thoughts were running through my head. And I thought, man, I should probably just, like a recalibration. I should probably just make sure my priorities in order. And make sure my perspective is straight. So I said, I'm going to take a couple weeks off from drinking. So I took a couple weeks off from drinking. I had a work function the next week down near the coast in South Carolina at a golf tournament. So everyone was going to be drinking. I was probably the only person that didn't drink a sip of alcohol at that event, but I made it 2 weeks. And I was like, well, this feels pretty good. Typically I would celebrate that by drinking, but I didn't. I said, man, I can make it to my court date, which was in a few months, because one of my charges was a felony and I had 4 or 5 other charges that I had gotten from the traffic stop. So I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know if I was going to lose my license. I didn't know if I was going to lose my job. I have some family in the area. I didn't know how that was going to look, what my parents were going to think, all of that. So I made it to my court date. Thankfully, they reduced the felony. That was very nice of them. And then they hit me with 100 hours community service and probation. So I said, I can make it till, it's only fair if I do the community service without drinking. So I did that. And I said, okay, maybe I can make it to the end of my probationary period. It was only 1 more month. I did that. And then I said, what if I can make it 1 year without taking a sip of alcohol? And the longest I've been before that, Tony, was probably a week in the past 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so my friend and I got pulled over on April 13th, 2019, over 6.5 years since the last time I took a sip of alcohol.
Yeah. Well done for staying the course. I'm sure that we'll find out that that's not been an easy path for you. So sure. you were, it was the moment that you woke up in the morning that it really struck you. Where I was trying to work out was when were you drunk that you got to the jail and then sat there contemplating what should be happening. But it sounds to me like you really sort of crashed out, fell asleep, and woke up the next morning, and that was your light bulb moment that you thought I need to change stuff.
Yeah, there wasn't much sleep in there. They put me in a cell with somebody else once I finally got checked in, and so I was on the floor in this little plastic tub, and there was a stranger in the other side of the room sleeping on his bed. I was in his space, and so I was a little nervous about that anyway, because he was sleeping when I got in there. I'm sure he was frustrated that I came in the middle of the night. And so, yeah, I mean, I just stared at the wall all night. So there was a lot of contemplation, and I didn't get out until maybe 2 p.m. the next day. So I had some time, in a cinder block room with one tiny window way up in the top. I couldn't see anything. It was, it was fit for doing some soul searching.
Yeah. Yeah. So over 6 years sober now. Did you try to quit before? Had you tried quitting before? And if so, what was different? What's different about this situation now than before?
Yeah, I would say that I tried to cut back before. I don't know that I knew that I wanted to quit and then I probably should quit, because for me it was very difficult to manage. It was almost impossible for me. I felt like to have one beer or two or three beers. That felt like a waste of time for me for most of my life, honestly. And I knew once I started, it was very, very hard for me to stop. That's something that's kind of carried on through my life in other areas too. So this one was different, I guess, because it gave me one specific point to start at. Any other time, I was just influenced by the environment, other people, habit. I mean, it becomes a habit. I don't even know that I was enjoying it at some point, but it was just what I do. I just open the fridge, get a beer, and drink it. That's just what my body does on autopilot at that point. So, yes, I had thought about quitting several times. Did I ever try to start? No, I didn't have any. Maybe that's a little different than a lot of stories you hear. Is that like we relapsed several times and several times, but I never really had that. I wanted to stop, and so I beat myself up and had some internal dialogue or internal monologue about that. But yeah, I didn't have a story where I like made it 3 months and relapsed or anything. I don't know. I think this is an important conversation because everybody approaches this different, and this is in no disrespect to the 12-step programs and things like that, because they've helped millions of people. That's not necessarily the route that I took. I felt like it was a lot of pressure to say, you can never drink again for the rest of your life. That felt like pressure to me. Like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be punished if I take one sip of alcohol 3 years from now. Like, I can't drink again forever. It just feels like so much pressure. So I never looked at it that way. That's why I told the story the way I did. It's like, oh, I can make it to 2 weeks. I can make it to court. I can make it to this, make it to this. And then by that time, you've got a new habit created and a routine created. And that's all I still say today. I say, I don't know if I'm going to ever drink again, but I'm probably not going to drink today. I've made it through every college football game I've attended. I've made it through every day on the lake with my friends. I've made it through every wedding. I've made it through every other holiday and celebration. If I can make it through those days, I can probably make it through today. And that's my only focus.
So, you had a history of suicidal ideation. Like, that's a really dark place to be in. So how would you describe that to someone who's never been there?
Oh, I think it can look different for different people. In my situation, I was a couple of years out of college or university. I was working. I had a quote unquote good job. I did work with great people. I stayed there for 18 years. So it was a phenomenal company, but I was the low man on the totem pole. I wasn't making a lot of money. I wanted to acquire things instead of joy and fulfillment and happiness. I wanted things. I thought that's what would bring that. Um, I viewed success as money and status, and like a lot of us do. We're ambitious, and ambition is good to a degree. But I think we need to step back and evaluate what's actually important to us. What do we really value? What really brings fulfillment? And I originally I attributed my depression to a relationship. I'd gotten out of a pretty serious relationship, the most serious relationship I had ever been in to that point. And so I thought that was kind of, I wanted to blame something. I mean, that's just what we do. I wanted to blame her. I wanted to blame the situation, but that took me into this. I'm also a middle child. So I have a lot of this inferiority, like chip on my shoulder. I can prove something to you type of mentality. A lot of middle children have that. And so when the relationship ended, that was sort of my response was like, oh, well, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough for her. I'm not going to be good enough for anybody. And really what had happened was I had been that way my whole life in every aspect. I thought I wasn't a good enough son, brother, grandson, friend, athlete, student. Anything that I did, I just felt like I was coming from behind. And I guess that weighed on me really heavily. And also in addition to that, I'm a very emotional man. where I'm from, that's difficult. It's difficult now today, but it was really difficult as a child 30, 40 years ago to be an emotional man and be brought to tears with certain stuff. I would watch a movie and cry. We would win a little league championship in baseball and I would cry. All kind of different. I would see one of my friends get hurt and I would cry. And it just like more than the average, more than what was seemed to be typical or normal. And I struggled really bad with that. So I continued to put myself in situations where I wouldn't have to be emotional. So I put a mask on. I put a mask on in front of my friends. I put a mask on in front of girls because I didn't think any of them would like me. I put a mask on at work because I didn't think I was good enough. I put a mask on in social settings because I want everybody to like me, and I didn't want to get emotional. So everything was just fun all the time. And then I would go home and just crash and just cry myself to sleep at night. And after that relationship ended, that was kind of my one comfort zone. I felt comfortable with her, like, oh, she really knows me. And when that was gone, I was kind of exposed and I had to address things that had been building up my entire life. It really didn't have very much to do with her like I thought it did. It had to do with discovering all the other things that I've been ignoring and suppressing. And on top of that, I drank and smoked weed and to cope with it because I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know how to handle it.
Yeah. So you stayed with the same company in industrial sales for 18 years. That's a long time to sort of maintain a professional facade, a mask, whilst you're falling apart inside and, basically drinking underneath all of that.
Yeah.
So what did you use as a coping mechanism?
Yeah. I mean, some of the days I went to work, I don't even know how I made it in the front door of the office building. And I would try to just hide the fact that I was hungover or upset. I would leave at lunch and go to my house and take a nap or just sit in my car and cry and come back in and try to work. I mean, not the whole 18 years, but for a period of time, that was a common occurrence. And yeah, that's what I did to cope was I tried to pretend everything was fine. I came home and drank a lot and smoked weed and listened to music. That was kind of my routine. And I will say that those things helped get me through the night sometimes. They were necessary. It's not what it's not the behavior I condone today. It's not the habits that I keep today, but there was a place for that. There were days where I felt like I couldn't make it through the night, that I would just lay there all night and cry in agony, and I would drink or I would smoke. I've said sometimes weed and music saved my life, and I mean that. I mean, before I knew how to actually cope and break down what was going on inside my head, that was what I had, and that was what I used. So I think it's important to say that because whatever we need to use to get us to the next living breath, we've got to do it. Whatever gets us to the next day, sometimes it might not be ideal. It might not be the thing we would say we want to use, but man, we need people here. We need you here, our listener. We need you here on this earth. And so whatever you can do to get to that next moment, that's what you need to do. Then once you get there, we can talk about healthy coping mechanisms, positive growth. We can talk about all those things next. But I think that's critical. I had some poor habits, but they got me here. And I'm so thankful for them that I'm here. Then eventually I started seeing a therapist. I had a great experience in therapy. I know that's not everyone's experience. I ended up leaving my job to become a mental health counselor. So obviously I had a really good experience there. But I just started looking inward and understanding how to feel my own emotions. And this is who I am. This is how I was wired. And all the things that I tried to hide for my whole life are actually the best parts of me. I didn't realize that until I went to counseling. And that was really important. Your original question was also about the suicidal ideation, and just a couple more thoughts on that real quick. What it looked like for me. I never made an attempt to end my life directly, and that's why I call it suicidal ideation. But there's this area. So in the mental health field, if I speak to companies now, like the one I left in corporate America, because suicide rates are climbing. And it's like, how do we know? What do we do? And so one thing that usually happens is people's behavior completely changes the closer they get to thinking about ending their own life. And so my behavior was just completely erratic. So I would say I never made an attempt to end my life directly, but I would drink 20 beers and hop in my truck and go drive on a backcountry road at 100 miles an hour. You know, we start engaging in really risky and dangerous behavior because there doesn't feel like there's a future. There doesn't feel like there's a purpose. And so we can be more reckless. And so a lot of my behaviors mirrored that. I would drink a whole lot and I would hop in my truck and just drive and drive and drive and cry and speed, you know, probably not paying attention. So I just wanted to add that in there a little bit about the suicidal ideation, kind of what that looked like for me. I mean, I thought about it constantly, and that's the ideation part. But then a small step further than that would be putting myself in positions that were extremely dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned therapy there. What I was going to say earlier was that obviously you're obviously a very empathetic person, and that as a man growing up, that can be very difficult, as you've pointed out. But you eventually got to therapy, and you've said you had a really positive experience. What made it work for you? Because, like you said, a lot of men don't find like therapy useful, or they don't. I mean, they literally have the lowest follow through rate. I mean, it's very, very low. So they might attend one session, and I think I read a recent study that was like under 30% dropout of people that actually go through it. So what made it? Yeah, it's really high. So what made it work for you, and what did your therapist do or say that broke through to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a great question. I talk about this a lot because there's a lot of variables at play. Everybody is different. What works for me hopefully will work for some other people because I had a great experience. But there are just different barriers along the way. And I don't want to say especially for men, but this is my only experience as a man in the southeastern United States. So cultural conditioning is a big part of it. We were taught when we were young people to suck it up and be tough. Showing emotion is a sign of weakness. Asking for help is a sign of weakness. I can handle this. That's the way that we're raised. And so overcoming that and saying, I have a problem, and then going and sitting in a room on a couch across from some lady or guy, to talk about all your problems, that seems like such a wild concept. So that's a big challenge. That's a big barrier to entry in counseling. Plus the stigma, I think along with that cultural conditioning, I think that we're made to believe, oh, if they go to therapy, something's wrong with them.
Do you know
They're
what,
broken.
Nick? I think that's a universal thing. I don't think it's just.
Okay.
I don't think it's just in your area. I think I've spoke to many men across the world, and it is not just limited to South Carolina.
Sure. Well, yeah, I just like to say that as a caveat because that's the only experience I can speak from.
Sure.
But yes, I mean, statistically, it is a thing worldwide for the most part, depending on the culture. I think getting people there is a big challenge. I had someone in my life. It's amazing how people come in your life at the right time. So I had a roommate at the time. When my relationship failed, I was living with a friend of mine who was a female. She was from my hometown, and she had moved to the city I was living in to go to school, to graduate school. And she kind of just picked up the pieces. I mean, when the girl and I had broken up, my friend stepped in and was like, what do I need to do? I'm here to help. And I kind of just unleashed everything on her. I had never said this stuff out loud to anybody in my life other than my girlfriend that I had just broken up with. And so I just told her everything. I told her I think about taking my own life every day. I cry myself to sleep. I drink because I can't cope. All of those things we just talked about, I unleashed them on this friend of mine. And she was like, all right, we're going to take care of it. She drove me to my hometown to sit in front of my parents and tell them that I had thought about taking my own life, something I probably needed to do for years, but was scared to tell them. And that changed my relationship with my family forever by her doing that. she also took me to my first counseling session. She said, I don't care what y'all talk about, but I'm going to drive you there and I'm going to sit in the waiting room and watch you walk in there for an hour and walk back out. That's what I'm going to do. And it was something about my relationship with her or how serious she was about this that was like, okay, I have to do this for her. This is the way I justified it, because I still wanted to be too tough and all that stuff. But it was like, oh, I'll do it for her. I manipulated it in my mind to say, hey, I'll go for her. So I went and I started going consistently. And that's probably the next barrier, like you said, is some people go once and then never go back. And so it makes them come back. I think for me, I had that type of personality where one beer wasn't enough. I needed 100. And I think that that's a transferable skill, so to speak, that if I'm committed to, if I do something and it's a routine for me, then I do it. I do it over and over and over again. I've done a 5K every day for over 5 years because I did them every day for a month. And then it was just what I did. So I do a 5K every day. So I think it's that same mentality. We can use some of that stuff that's seen as a negative and transfer it to positive behaviors and habits. So every Tuesday at 11 o'clock, I walked into my therapist's office for 10 years, every single Tuesday, and sat with her for an hour. I didn't like it at first. I didn't think it was helpful at first. I told her straight up, I said, Kim, all you're trying to do is just get your check and get out of here. You don't care about me. You don't know me. I'm broken. You're not going to be able to fix me, on and on and on, all that stuff. Our first 3 or 4 sessions were like that. And every time I said something, she didn't respond. She didn't attack me back. She didn't justify her position. She just said, it's okay. It's all right. We're going to sit here and talk about it. We're going to sit here and talk about it. And she just gave me the space to be myself. I never felt uncomfortable. I cried and she was like, it's all right. I cried too. It just made it feel okay. So all that stuff that I had tried to not let out in front of everybody my whole life, that was a place that became an environment where it was okay to do that. So sometimes I craved it. I was like, man, I can't wait to go back to therapy on Tuesday so I can just take a deep breath, because I couldn't do that in my life. That's what we do to ourselves. We pile so much on us and we want to look like we've got it all together, especially now with social media. We got to compare ourselves to everybody else that's living the perfect life. And so, I was able to go every Tuesday and just kind of do whatever, vent, cry, be mad, be happy, celebrate. We celebrated together. It's not all just the bad stuff. It's just processing through what we have going on. So that was kind of it for me. Yeah.
Wow. That's good. And you obviously had a good experience, a positive experience with your therapy that then led you on to doing a master's in, what's your master's in?
The master's is in counseling and rehabilitation. So it's to be a therapist. Yep. And the specialty is working with people with disabilities and other underserved populations. But yeah.
Okay. So that's no small decision to take at 40?
Yeah. 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 That's not a small decision at all. I had thought for a while, and this is probably part of the same story. This is probably due to my experience in therapy. I mean, I began to think, okay, there's more to it. Like I have a potential that I've always realized, but for so much of my life, it was like, well, I don't know how to get going in that direction. I'll never get there because I'm just down here treading water all the time. I'm just stuck all the time. And counseling started to break some of that free. It started to kind of open up some new thoughts that, I don't have to work for this company. I don't have to be miserable all the time. I don't have to be happy in front of everybody else. I can actually wear my emotions, whatever they are, and I can feel them and express them. So I learned all of that stuff. And it's interesting because I love the people at my company. I worked for a phenomenal company. I worked there for 18 years and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to work there. I also realized that I got to a point where it no longer served me. I had let myself get caught up in the chasing the money, and a lot of people in this industry do. But I allowed that to happen to me. I don't want to blame the industry. I allowed it to happen. It does create an environment for some of that behavior, but But I have the agency. I have the power to dictate my decisions. And I didn't realize that for a long time. I learned that through counseling. Man, I have a stake in this. I can make decisions for myself. And that sounds so simple. Of course you can. But we don't realize that a lot of time. We just get on this hamster wheel and we're just riding and riding and riding.
Around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes we don't realize that. So, yeah, I was there for a long time. There were several times in counseling where I would talk to my therapist, Kim, about, I want to do something different. I want to move to another country. I want to start my own business, whatever. But I never quite was able to do it until 2019. I think this was kind of just a build of that type of sentiment. I was on a volunteer construction trip in Nicaragua. I had been on 4 or 5 other trips to Bolivia. Similarly, we'd go and help a community build a structure. And I was there and I just remember feeling that feeling that you get when you realize you're in the exact right place, doing the exact right thing with the exact right people that are supposed to be there. We don't get those feelings all the time in life, but when you have it, it's unmistakable. And I had one of those moments there. And I remember telling my friend that I was with, I was like, I don't want to get back on the plane. I want to live here. Whatever it was about, everything about it just felt free and aligned and just perfect. So I did come back home, and my boss was the first person I called. I told him I was going to quit my job and move to Nicaragua. I said, I'm going to figure it out. There's some people down there that are going to help me get on my feet. We had worked with some people and they were going to let me stay with them for a couple months if I helped them out on their, at their property. And then I would figure out how to, I don't know, sell something and just live life in Nicaragua. That was my plan. And I sold my house. I bought a one-way plane ticket to Nicaragua. And it was such a good exercise for me mentally to go through this, because it was like, man, if I leave my job, it's going to work out. It's going to be okay. I never thought that before. I felt like I had to do it. I didn't have that agency and power, like I was saying. So for the first time, I felt like that. So about 2 weeks before my flight, the people in Nicaragua called me and said that there had been a war breakout in the country. There was a coup on the government and it got very violent and a lot of people were getting killed. And I don't want to minimize their situation, but it changed my whole plan. Obviously, they said, you can't come right now. You can't come. It's too dangerous. Thank you for your spirit and your heart, but it's too dangerous to come down here right now. And so I thought I was moving down there. I thought I was changing everything and starting a new life, so to speak, but that got put on hold. So I ended up staying with my company for a few more years, but something changed in my mentality forever. My perspective changed. My mindset changed. I was like, man, I got to take care of myself. If I leave here, I'm going to be okay. But there's more to me than the Nic Collins who works for this company. That's not my whole identity. Yeah, I'm a salesman. I'm a manager. I'm a this and that. That's part of my identity, but that's not my whole identity. I'm so much more than that. I'm a person that can go out in service to other people in this world and make a difference. I'm a son, a grandson, a brother, a partner. I'm all of these other things. There's so much more to my identity. I started to realize that through counseling, that it wasn't just, I have to go make X number of dollars at this company so I can have this status so people will think I'm awesome. Who cares? I was comparing myself to metrics that don't even really serve me. And so that nugget was in my mind at that point, Tony, thankfully. And a few years later, I made the decision to go back to school and get a master's in counseling because of my experience that I had with my therapist, Kim. And for 2 years, I was working full-time still and going to school at night full-time for a master's degree. And until I finally left the company and was able to change career paths.
Yeah, that's great. I've got I've heard from someone who's Swedish. When they get asked, "What do you do?" So if I back then, if I'd have said, "What do you do, Nic?" you'd have said, "I work in industrial sales for X company," right? But they don't say that. They don't say that. They say what they do, not what their job is. So they say, "I'm a skier," or I'm a cyclist, or am I? And I love that. I just love that. It's just such a great way to look at your life, because it means that your job's not defining what you do, you know?
Yeah.
So we know what we'll
Yeah.
both answer. We know what we'd both answer if I asked you that now, but we'll get onto that in a minute. So, so going from being in the therapist chair to then becoming a therapist, do you think that perspective, that because you've got that perspective, that gives you a very unique kind of like view on things when you're now practicing?
I do think so. I think it definitely does, because I have the experience of what that room can feel like. We have to be able to hold tension and all emotions and feelings as a therapist. And that can be uncomfortable if it's not something that you've experienced yourself, to sit in a room and watch somebody else cry and hold their emotion in a way that feels supportive and productive instead of uncomfortable and anxious. So I think that did really inform my perspective and ability to hold that space for people. I work
Yeah.
I work for a company now. I do some group therapy, and the clients I serve are called high acuity. So people that have been in inpatient mental health facilities, people that are struggling with suicidal ideation, severe substance use, um, different things like that. And so, yeah, I think my experience helps me big time to be able to walk that walk with them right alongside of them as they're going through that. I think the flip side may be that we also need to have the awareness that my experience was my experience.
Yeah.
That's not everybody's experience. And so we have to be open for that as well. Like I don't tell people, well, this is how you're going to feel because this is how I felt. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. So that's just one thing that I always keep in my mind, is that my experience was mine, and I'm just here to help them, help guide them and walk alongside of them in their experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a lived experience, isn't it, that you can bring to that?
Yeah, big time.
Yeah. So you've run 2 marathons now, and you've run 7 ultra marathons. When did running become part of your recovery, and what does it do for your mental health?
It does a lot for my mental health. I would say, so I stopped drinking in 2019, and in August of 2019, or in the summer of 2019, I had seen a documentary called The Iron Cowboy. And this guy,
James?
yeah, I can't think of his, James
James
Lawrence.
Lawrence. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I had seen this documentary, and I mean, if you don't know, what this guy did was do a full triathlon every day for 50 days in 50 different states. Unbelievable. Swim 2 miles, bike, whatever it is, 200 miles or something, and then run a full marathon. He did that every day for 50 days in all 50 states, which doesn't even seem like it's possible. I don't want to spoil it for you, but he more or less, he does it. It's amazing. Logistically, I don't even know how that works. And that was so far from anything I had ever considered before. But in that documentary, he had a daughter that rode around in the camper. She was maybe 10 years old. And at the end of every day, it would be midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, sometimes when he finished, she would get out and run the last 5K with him. He had been doing this all day long. She would get out and run the last 5K with him every time. And I said, my gosh, if this little 10-year-old girl can get out there and run a 5K with her dad after she's been riding in a camper all day across states, all this stuff, not sleeping, not eating right. I said, if she can do this, damn it, I can do it. I can run a 5K every day. So that's what started this whole idea. So I ran a 5K every day in August of 2019. Every single day I ran a 5K. Some were on the treadmill, some were with friends, some were outside, but I ran a 5K every day. So that kind of kickstarted it. And I'm so glad, because I needed that, because I was recently not drinking. I had only been not drinking for, 5 or 6 months at that time, 4 months. And so I needed something like that to latch onto and to create a new hobby and habit. And thankfully I did, because we all know what happens in March of 2020. The world shut down. What would I have done if I didn't have a new positive habit? I don't want to know. I don't want to know what I would have done if I didn't have running. I mean, I think it's that critical and that serious in my life, because I would have been sitting there I lived alone at the time. I couldn't go to work. We couldn't go out to restaurants. We couldn't go in public. What would I have done? I probably would have drank. I don't know. I hope I wouldn't have, but anyway, so that's how important running is to me. That's what got me into it, was that streak from watching that show. And I still run all the time. And so during COVID, I started running trails at a state forest near my house. And I just fell in love with trail running. The ability to get out there and just live and breathe and exist in nature is something that I always enjoyed, but took for granted. And so really diving into it and immersing myself in nature, it sparked something. I ran my first ultramarathon that June of 2020, 3 months after a hernia surgery that I had. So, and then I never looked back.
That's amazing. Do you know it's really funny about that story there is that your inspiration's not come from James, it's come from his daughter,
Yeah.
which is like, obviously when James was doing that, he was obviously thinking, I want to inspire people. I want people to realize that they can do more than they think, etc. And I guess at no stage did he even envisage that his 10-year-old daughter would inspire people to do things. So that's just amazing. That's just an amazing kind of.
Perhaps I should tell him that it's interesting. And now James would, if I watched that movie today, James would be the inspiration. But it all depends on where we are at the time. You hear people say all the time, be where your feet are. Mm-hmm. What does that mean? I think that's my example of be where your feet are. I couldn't have been inspired by James. Maybe I was inspired by him, like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. People do crazy things. This is amazing. But I couldn't close that gap then. I wasn't even running. Maybe once every 2 weeks, I would run a couple miles. That was it. So I could never close that gap. So when we say be where your feet are, it was because of his daughter, because I could close that gap. I could run 3 miles. It would be hard, but I could run 3 miles every day for a month. And it was hard. It was hard. And 6 years later, it's funny to think that was hard, because now I can do that for breakfast like it's nothing. But it's only because of that consistent, constant action.
Yeah, absolutely. So 7 ultramarathons, that's not just running, that's endurance, isn't it? It's a different view on moving your body forward. So what's the connection between endurance running and your sobriety for you?
Big time. I mean, I think it's reminding myself all the time that I can accomplish something difficult. And I know for a fact I could not be doing this if I was still drinking the way that I was drinking. I know that. And so it has become a good place for me to put my energy and my time and my emotion. It's also something that my girlfriend Nikki does. And so it's something we can do together, which helps. We met running. And so having similar interests has been a critical part of that. And, but yeah, for sobriety, it's amazing. You meet a lot of other people also who don't consume alcohol. And I meet a lot of people that do. And I don't have any judgment for them one way or the other. I'm not saying my way is the way, but I know it works for me and has worked for me thus far. And yeah, man, there's just something about putting yourself outside of your comfort zone far enough to know that, man, I'm not sure if I can achieve this, but I'm just going to keep going and keep going and keep going. That's the same way I look at sobriety every day. I'm just not going to drink today. I'm just not going to drink today. I can make it one more day. I can make it one more day. So it's the same mentality. And man, when you could put that towards something like ultra running and run a 50K, how many people on earth have ever run a 50K? Less than 0.5%, probably. Man, that's rare air that we live in. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. So just
I'm not good at it. I'm not fast. I don't usually stand on the podium, but man, it's cool to realize that accomplishment.
Absolutely. Sorry. 100%. So just back to that question about with the Swedish description of yourself. If I said to you now, what do you do? What's your answer, Nic?
I love that you said that, because I tried to start doing something similar, because I still go to some leadership conferences and corporate events. And that's everyone's first question. Hey, what do you do? Hey, what do you do? And every time I say, well, I run, I trail run. I do Spartan races. I strum my guitar. I hang out with my family. You know, all the things that fill me up, all the things that make me smile. And as soon as I finish, that's my response. I was like, what do you do that brings you joy? I add that bit to it because they don't start with that. You know, I know that they asked me what I'm doing for work. I get it. That's what they meant, but I don't care. I skip that. Nobody wants to talk about work. Nobody wants to talk about that. What lights you up, man? What sets your soul on fire? That's what I want to hear about.
Yeah. I love that question. If you could shrink that down to a 1 or 2 word description, then what would you, if I said, what do you do? What would you say?
I would say I'm an adventurer.
Yes. I love that.
Yeah. I'm an adventurer. That's what I would say.
Yeah. That's great. So you've been sober for 6 years plus. You're a therapist. You run ultras, but I'm guessing you're not all perfect now. What challenges do you still have?
Yeah, there's still challenges. I mean, that's life. I think the difference is how we cope with them. I'll say this about therapy before I answer that question. People ask me all the time, like, "Oh, you went to therapy, so you're good now." You don't necessarily get fixed. It's not a switch that we flip. Your personality traits generally are going to be your personality traits throughout your lifespan. What we learn in therapy is how to cope with things, how to handle things, how to approach things, how to interact with people, how to communicate with people, how to communicate with ourselves, how to be aware of ourselves and realize when we need to take a step back or we need to engage further to balance. That's what therapy does. So it creates this tool belt, you know, full of tools that we can pull out when something different comes up. And so with all that being said, yeah, things come up all the time. I left a career where I was making what I would say very good money to take a gamble on a career that typically makes half that. I'm going to rewrite that story, but it's a challenge to build that. So financially, I took a big gamble. When I left my job, I drove a van across America for 2 months because that brings me joy. That cost me money. I wasn't making money. So that comes up sometimes. So how do I cope with that and deal with that? Diet is difficult for me. I justify not drinking by eating whatever I want. Well, if I'm not training for a big race, then I gain weight. That comes up for me quite often. So how can I take the tools that I've learned about drinking and apply them to the eating side? So that's part of it. I recently wrote a book that came out last Tuesday, actually, and it's been an amazing experience, but managing expectations when you create something like that is a challenge. So I've been walking through that. What do I expect? Should I expect anything? How do I show gratitude for the people that show up and support me? And for the fact that I accomplished something amazing and put a piece of art out into the world. That's success. I should measure success like that. So I fight that battle sometimes too about expectations and with different things. So yeah, those are some of the challenges I have today.
Yeah. So that was going to be my next question, actually, about your book that you've just released. So tell me what that's about, and what was it that actually made you think I need to write a book about this?
Yeah, thank you. The book is called Advance: Discover Alignment and Authenticity by Living in Concert with Your Situation. And I call it Advance because that's the whole deal for all of us. We just have to move forward. We just have to start and take a step and then take another step and then take another step. That's all we have to do. And that looks different for all of us. We constantly compare ourselves to other people. A lot of the people we're comparing ourselves to, we don't even really want what they want, but we feel like, well, whatever you want, Tony, I want that plus a little bit more. Why? We want two different things. Why am I competing with you and comparing myself to you? Why don't we collaborate? And why don't I think, man, what does advancement look like for me? What does growth look like for me? That's what I want to do. I want to wake up every day and keep going. And so that's why I wrote Advance. It's about just living in alignment with yourself authentically. How can we show up as ourselves? How can we realize what it's like to be authentic? And then how can we show up in the world every day in every domain of our life, in every capacity, and be true to ourselves? I think that's so important. And it's difficult to do that today. It's probably always been difficult. It's more difficult today than it's ever been with social media and
Mhm.
and media in general. So that's what the book is about. I appreciate you asking me. It's been a wild ride writing it and now putting it out into the world.
Yeah, that's great. Well done, because getting to everyone start, people that like to write, they start a book, they never finish it. There's probably a billion unfinished books out there. So just well done for getting to the end of it and getting it out there into the world to share with everybody. So Nic, one last question for you. The motto of this podcast is "One step stronger, live longer." Hence my T-shirt.
Love it.
What does that mean to you?
I think is exactly what we were just talking about. I was able to hear a guy speak one time named Mike Posner, and I had followed him for a long time. He's a singer-songwriter. He had been nominated for a Grammy. He ended up walking across America a few years ago, and then he ended up climbing Mount Everest and standing on the top of the tallest mountain in the world. And he talks about his 5 keys to happiness. And the first key is step 1 is to take one step. So he said, when I walked across America, I had logistical challenges. Where was I going to eat? Where was I going to sleep? How was I? Which direction was I going to go in? But none of that matters if I didn't step into the Atlantic Ocean and take one step onto the beach to walk across to the Pacific Ocean. So step 1 is to take one step. Imperfect action trumps inaction. So that's the way that I see that one step that you talk about is the same way. Like, we just have to act. We just have to do it and start. And so that's what advance. I mean, it's a similar thing, Tony, is to advance. And the more that we step, the more strength and resilience and grit we build. And that's how we grow. So I love it.
100%. That's a great answer there, Nic. I love that. So if our listener wants to find out more about you, connect with you, follow your work and your journey, and maybe even get hold of your book, I'm sure do you ship to the UK?
Yeah.
Where can they go find you? Where's the best place?
Yeah, the book is on Amazon, so you can buy it in ebook, softcover, or hardcover. And in a couple of weeks, it'll be available on audiobook as well. So you can listen to my voice. I read the whole book. You can listen to that if you want here in a couple weeks. My name's Nic Collins, Nic with no K. So on Instagram, that's where I'm probably most active. Nic_Collins_authentic. You can also find me under that name on TikTok, Nic Collins on Facebook, NicCollinsAuthentic.com. So there's several ways. If you Google it, you can probably find me in one of those areas. And I would love to connect. I like just chatting with people. You don't have to buy one of my products or services. Just reach out and let's talk about something. I love connecting with new people.
Well, Nic, listen, that's been an amazing insight into your life and your journey through into sobriety. And thank you so much for sharing that. And listen, take care. And don't forget, one step stronger, live longer.
Thanks so much, Tony, and the listener. I appreciate you too. Thanks.
I really hope you've enjoyed this episode and found some value in it. If you have, remember you can like, subscribe, and leave a review. It will really help to get this message out to more listeners who need to hear these kind of conversations. Thanks, and don't forget, one step stronger, live longer.